When I picked up the phone to ask my son Max about the wedding date, my daughter-in-law Lena looked me dead in the eye and, with the coldest little smile, said, "Actually, we got married yesterday. We kept it really small. Only invited the people who were important to us." Felt like somebody dumped a bucket of ice water straight over my head. People who were important to us. Those words echoed in my ears. For 3 years, I had been paying their $500 monthly rent. For 3 years, I had stocked their fridge whenever they were broke. For 3 years, I had bought furniture, covered emergencies, and bailed them out every time life got hard. And apparently, I wasn't important enough. I stood there in my own living room, holding my phone so tightly my hand hurt. Across from me, Lena made herself comfortable on the couch I'd paid for. My son wouldn't even look me in the eye. Back in my closet hung the pale pink dress I'd bought for their wedding. A dress I'd spent nearly $200 on. The shoes were still in the box. I had imagined wearing them while standing beside my son on the happiest day of his life. Now they were just reminders of a fantasy that never existed. For weeks I'd been preparing. I had already set aside $1,000 as a wedding gift. I'd called my sister Diana in Chicago to tell her the exciting news. I deep cleaned my house because I thought they might stop by afterward to celebrate. Every single plan, every single hope, gone in 4 words. Only invited special people. Finally Max looked up. His voice sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced it beforehand. "Mom, it was just something intimate. Really small. Just us and a couple of witnesses." That would have been believable if I hadn't already seen the photos online. I saw Lena's parents smiling beside the newlyweds. I saw her brothers and sisters raising champagne glasses. I saw the wedding reception. I saw the dress. The same dress I'd unknowingly helped pay for when I gave Lena $800 the month before. I saw everything. Everything except myself. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, my phone rang. It was Lena. Funny how quickly people remember your number when they need something. The confident woman who had excluded me from her wedding was gone. Now she sounded panicked, desperate, almost scared. "Renata, we're in trouble. The rent's overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, he's going to kick us out." He paused, then added, "You forgot to send the transfer." Forgot. That word almost made me laugh. I sat there quietly for a moment, remembering all those years, all those trips to the bank, all those sacrifices, all those times I skipped buying things for myself so they could have what they wanted. And now, after treating me like I didn't matter, they were calling as if nothing had happened. I took a slow breath, then said something that surprised even me. "Lena." My voice was calm, almost too calm. "Didn't I tell you I only help special people?" Silence. Absolute silence. For several seconds nobody said a word. For the first time in years. I wasn't the one shaking. She was. "Ah, Renata. I don't understand." Her voice cracked. "We've always been special to you." Then came the classic line. "You're like a second mother to me." But, of course I was. Whenever money was involved. The same sweet voice she'd used when asking for help with the wedding dress, the honeymoon, the wedding rings, the apartment bills, the car expenses. Every request wrapped in fake affection. Every favor disguised as family love. And for years, bought it. I spent years walking on eggshells, watching every word, trying not to upset them, trying to earn little scraps of affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the understanding mother-in-law, the emergency fund, the backup plan, the human ATM. But something about those 4 words, "only invited special people," flipped a switch inside me. A switch that had been waiting years to be turned on. That night I sat down with a calculator. For the first time I wanted to know exactly how much my generosity had cost me. The numbers shocked me. Rent. $500 a month for 36 months. $18,000. Food and groceries. Roughly $200 a month. Another $7,200. Birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, anniversary gifts, around $3,000. Medical emergencies, $800. The car loan they never repaid, $2,500. Air conditioner repair, $600. Living room furniture, $1,200. Total, $33,400. $33,400. Money that came from my retirement, my savings, the inheritance my late husband left so I could enjoy my later years in peace. And what had I gotten in return? A front row seat to my own disrespect. I stared at the final number. Then something happened. For the first time, I stopped feeling sad and started feeling angry. Not explosive anger. Not screaming anger. The dangerous kind. Quiet kind. The kind that changes your life forever. The next morning I woke up feeling different. Not happier. Not calmer. Just done making excuses. Done chasing approval. Done pretending everything was okay. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at myself. The same tired eyes. The same wrinkles earned from a lifetime of loving people more than myself. But there was something new staring back at me. Resolve. The kind that only comes after your heart has been broken one too many times. I walked into the kitchen and made coffee. For 40 years that had been my morning routine. But this time something was missing. I wasn't checking my phone to see if Max had texted. I wasn't wondering if Lena needed anything. I wasn't planning my day around someone else's problems. For the first time in years, I was the center of my own life. And honestly, felt weird. But it also felt good. As I sat down with my coffee, my phone lit up. But I stared at the screen. Normally, I would have answered before the second ring. Not this time. Rang. And rang. And rang. Eventually it stopped. 10 minutes later it started again. This time it was Lena. Ignored. A few minutes after that a text came through. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. I looked at it for a second. Then deleted it. No response. No explanation. No guilt. Just silence. By early afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. Go for a walk. Just because I wanted to. No errands. No bank runs. No grocery trips for Max and Lena. No pharmacy pickups. Just a walk. Imagine that. As I walked through the neighborhood park, memories started flooding back. I remembered bringing Max there when he was little. Back when he'd run toward me with scraped knees and messy hair. Back when he'd throw his arms around my neck and tell everyone I was the best mom in the world. What happened to that little boy? When did he become a man who only called when he needed money? More importantly, when did I start believing I had to buy my own son's love? The question followed me all the way to the bank. I stood outside the building for a moment. This bank had become part of my routine. Month after month. Transfer after transfer. Always the same destination. Always the same names. Max and Lena. Through the glass, the branch manager spotted me. Mr. Klein. We'd known each other for years. He smiled and waved me inside. Mrs. Richter. Good to see you. I smiled politely. Mr. Klein, I need to make some changes. A few minutes later, we were sitting in his office. I want to cancel every automatic transfer connected to my son and daughter-in-law. For a moment he just stared. Like he wasn't sure he'd heard me correctly. Are you certain? His tone was gentle. Concerned. These transfers have been active for years. He nodded. I'm sure. He hesitated. Did something happen? I looked down at my hands. Then back at him. Yes. A small smile appeared on my face. I finally opened my eyes. For a second neither of us spoke. Then Mr. Klein slowly nodded. Like he understood more than he was saying. While he pulled up my account information, my phone started vibrating non-stop on the desk. Lena. Max again. It would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Apparently they had a sixth sense for financial danger. I turned the phone over. Then powered it off completely. Finally. Mr. Klein finished processing the paperwork and handed me a stack of documents. Before I signed them, he looked at me carefully. "Mrs. Richter." His voice softened. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but over the years I've watched you do a lot for your family." He nodded. "I know. I just want to make sure nobody is pressuring you into making these changes." The irony nearly made me laugh. This man, whose only connection to me was banking paperwork, was showing more concern for my well-being than my own son. "No, Mr. Klein." I signed the final document. "For the first time in years, nobody is pressuring me." Then I added, "I've simply stopped pressuring myself." His smile was genuine, and somehow that meant more than I expected. When I walked out of the bank, I felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying a backpack full of bricks for years and had finally taken it off. For 3 years, every paycheck, every savings account balance, every financial decision had revolved around keeping 2 grown adults comfortable. Now, the money was mine again, and the realization was intoxicating. I stopped at a small cafe nearby. Normally I would have skipped it. $5 for coffee and a pastry would have felt irresponsible. Because $5 saved was $5 available for Max and Lena. But today, I ordered the coffee and the pastry and sat by the window enjoying every bite. No guilt, no anxiety, no mental calculations, just enjoyment. It was amazing how luxurious something so simple could feel. While I sat there, I started thinking about everything I'd given up. The vacations I never took, the hobbies I abandoned, the dinners with friends I constantly canceled, the clothes I never bought, the experiences I kept postponing. Always for them, always later, always someday. But someday never came. Because there was always another emergency, another bill, another crisis, another hand reaching into my pocket. And suddenly a thought hit me. What if the rest of my life didn't belong to them? What if it belonged to me? That idea felt revolutionary, and terrifying, and wonderful. By the time I got home, I had made up my mind. Things were changing. For real this time. But when I turned onto my street, my stomach dropped. 3 cars were parked in front of my house. 1 belonged to Max. 1 belonged to Lena. And the third, I didn't recognize it. Slowed down. Something felt wrong. Then I noticed movement through my living room window. My blood went cold. Someone was inside. And then I remembered. Keys. I had given them spare keys years ago. 'Cause I trusted them. 'Cause I believed family looked out for each other. 'Cause I was a fool. Taking a deep breath, I parked the car. For a moment I just sat there. Watching. Thinking. Preparing. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't going to be another phone call. This was going to be a confrontation. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't planning to back down. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside. The scene waiting for me stopped me cold. Max was sitting on my couch with his head in his hands. Lena was pacing around the room like a nervous animal. And standing by my dining table was a man I'd never seen before. A man in an expensive gray suit. A man flipping through my personal documents. My documents, bank statements, financial records, private papers, things he had absolutely no business touching. What the hell is going on here? My voice came out louder than I expected. All 3 heads snapped toward me. Somehow, they looked at me like I was the one who didn't belong there. Lena rushed forward first. The panic in her face looked almost convincing. "Renata, thank God you're here. No greeting. No apology. Straight to business. We need to talk." I crossed my arms. "About what?" She gestured toward the stranger. "This is Mr. Fisher. He's helping us." Helping us. That phrase immediately set off alarms in my head. The man stepped forward with a practiced smile. The kind lawyers wear when they're about to say something unpleasant. "Mrs. Richter, it's a pleasure to meet you." I ignored his hand completely. His smile faded a little. "But what exactly are you doing in my house?" Before he could answer, Max stood up. He looked exhausted. Not sad. Not guilty. Terrified. Terrified of losing money. Mom, we went to the bank. There it was. The real reason. Not concern. Not family. Money. We found out you cancelled all the transfers. He nodded. That's correct. You also blocked our access to your accounts. Also correct. Max exchanged a nervous look with Lena. Then came the line I'd been expecting. We're worried about you. I almost laughed. Course they were. The moment the money stopped flowing, suddenly my health became a concern. Funny how that works. Mr. Fisher cleared his throat. Mrs. Richter, your children have expressed concerns regarding your recent behavior. My recent behavior? Yes. He opened a folder. Theatrical. Calculated. Professional. They believe you're making irrational financial decisions and may be experiencing cognitive decline. For a second, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. Cognitive decline. Was this guy serious? Then it clicked. Oh wow. This wasn't about helping me. This wasn't about concern. This was about control. They were trying to paint me as mentally incompetent, so they could get access to my money. I slowly set my purse down, then walked over to the dining table. Without saying a word, I gathered every document spread across it. My documents, my records, my life, and held them against my chest. You had no right to look through these. Mr. Fisher adjusted his tie. We're simply trying to assess the situation. No. I looked him directly in the eye. You were snooping. The room fell silent. Then Max spoke. Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder. I stared at him. For a moment, I couldn't believe this was my son talking. The same little boy I used to rock to sleep. The same child whose scraped knees I'd kissed better. Now he was standing in my living room treating me like a problem to be managed. We think you need help. I laughed. Actually laughed. And that seemed to make them uncomfortable. But because I was done being uncomfortable for their convenience. You think I need help? Mom. No, Max. I pointed toward the door. You got married without me. His face tightened. You treated me like I didn't matter. That's not. You called me when you needed rent money. Lena looked away. You only remembered I existed when your bills showed up. Nobody said a word. Because everybody in that room knew it was true. Lena tried a different approach. The sweet voice. The fake kindness. The emotional manipulation. Classic Lena. Renata, honey. Honey. Now I was honey again. Interesting. She stepped closer. We know you're upset. Upset. That's what she called betrayal. We just think maybe loneliness is affecting your judgment. There it was. The setup. The foundation for everything they were planning. If they could convince people I was lonely, then they could convince people I was confused. And if they could convince people I was confused, they could take control of my finances. The whole thing suddenly became crystal clear. My anger disappeared, replaced by something colder, something sharper. Understanding. I am not confused. My voice was calm, steady, dangerously steady. I'm the clearest I've been in years. Mr. Fisher stepped in again. Mrs. Richter, no one is attacking you. The audacity. A stranger standing in my house, looking through my private documents, telling me I wasn't being attacked. That's rich. He continued. Your family simply wants to make sure your assets are protected. Not happiness. Not well-being. Not emotional health. Interesting choice of words. Then he opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. We've prepared some temporary documents. I looked at them, then at him. What kind of documents? A power of attorney. The room went silent. Even the air felt different. Power of attorney. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They wanted legal control. Control over my accounts, my money, my future, my life. Max suddenly looked hopeful. Like this was all going according to plan. Mom, this would just help us manage things. Manage things. Almost choked. For 3 years I'd been managing their lives. Now they wanted to manage mine. Lena nodded enthusiastically. It's only temporary. Temporary. Another favorite word of manipulators. Nothing is ever permanent. Until it is. I slowly reached out. Took the paperwork from Mr. Fisher's hand. Everyone watched. Expecting. Waiting. Hoping. Then I walked directly to the kitchen. Opened the trash can. And dropped the entire stack inside. The sound echoed through the room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Smiled. For the first time all day. There's your answer. The look on Lena's face was priceless. Pure shock. Pure outrage. Pure panic. And honestly, after everything they'd done, felt amazing. For a few seconds nobody said a word. The room was so quiet you could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Then Lena snapped. What is wrong with you? There it was. The mask slipping. The sweet, concerned daughter-in-law vanished. Now I was seeing the real Lena. The one who only came out when she wasn't getting what she wanted. I folded my arms. Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing. Her face turned red. We're trying to help you. No. I shook my head. You're trying to help yourselves. The truth landed like a punch. Because deep down, everyone in that room knew I was right. Max stepped forward. Mom, please. That word again. Please. Amazing how often people discover manners when money is involved. We have bills. I stared at him. And his eyes widened. As if he genuinely couldn't believe I wasn't immediately offering to solve the problem. The rent. And the car payment. And the credit cards. Still nothing. No sympathy. No rescue mission. No emergency transfer. Just silence. Finally, Max threw his hands into the air. You can't just cut us off overnight. That sentence told me everything. Nut. You hurt us. Nut. We miss you. Nut. We love you. Well. His concern was that the funding had stopped. I looked directly at him. Watch me. The room exploded. Mom, you don't understand. We had plans. We made commitments. Lena's voice cracked. We were counting on you. And there it was. The truth. Not hidden. Not sugar-coated. Not disguised. Only. Honest. They had built their lives around my money. Not around their income. Not around their hard work. Not around responsibility. My money. I laughed. Cold laugh. The kind that surprises even you. You were counting on me. Lena froze. She realized what she'd just admitted. Too late. I took a step toward her. So let me get this straight. Pointed toward myself. You excluded me from your wedding. Pointed toward them. But you expected me to keep paying for your life afterward. Neither of them answered. 'Cause there was no answer. Only entitlement. Mr. Fisher tried to regain control of the conversation. Mrs. Richter, emotions aren't helping anyone right now. I turned toward him. No, what's not helping is a lawyer sitting in my house trying to convince me to hand over my finances. His jaw tightened. We're trying to create a smooth transition. I laughed again. Smooth transition. That was a cute way of saying. Sign here and let your son take your money. Then Lena said something that changed everything. Something she probably wished she could take back. Something that revealed exactly how she saw me. Her voice shook with frustration. You can't do this to us. I stared at her. Why not? Because. She stopped. Too late. I saw it in her eyes. She was angry. Not sad. Not hurt. Angry. Angry because her plan was falling apart. Then she said it. The sentence that finally destroyed whatever remained of our relationship. Everything you have is going to belong to us someday anyway. Silence. Total silence. Even Max looked horrified. Because she had said the quiet part out loud. Everything you have is going to belong to us someday anyway. There it was. The truth. Naked. Ugly. Undeniable. In their minds. I was already dead. Not literally. Financially. Emotionally. Practically. I wasn't a person. I was an inheritance with a pulse. A waiting game. Future payday. A problem that hadn't expired yet. The realization hit me harder than the wedding. Harder than the humiliation. Harder than the betrayal. 'Cause suddenly years of behavior made sense. The constant requests for money. The lack of genuine affection. The phone calls only when they needed something. The complete absence of interest in my life. It all fit. They weren't investing in a relationship. They were protecting an asset. Me. Or more specifically, my bank account. I looked at Lena. Really looked at her. And for the first time I felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No sadness. No disappointment. Nothing. The emotional bond had finally snapped. You need to leave. My voice was calm. It had come. The kind of calm that scares people. Lena blinked. What? You heard me. I pointed at the door. Get out. Max stepped forward. Mom, don't do this. Get out. Mom. Out. Mr. Fisher grabbed his briefcase. For the first time all afternoon, he looked uncomfortable. He had probably expected tears. Negotiations. Maybe even a compromise. Instead, he was watching his entire strategy collapse. Lena wasn't done. She pointed at me. Her face twisted with anger. You're going to regret this. Smiled. No. For the first time in years. I really meant it. No, Lena. I looked around my living room. The couch I'd bought. The table I'd paid for. The house I'd worked my whole life to own. Then I looked back at them. I regret the last 3 years. Nobody spoke. 'Cause nobody could argue with that. Max's face fell. For just a second. Thought I saw shame. Real shame. Not fear. Not panic. Shame. But it disappeared almost immediately. Replaced by resentment. The same resentment people feel when the free ride ends. Finally, Mr. Fisher headed toward the door. This isn't over, Mrs. Richter. I met his gaze. You're right. Then I smiled. But it is for today. One by one they walked outside. Lena first. Then Mr. Fisher. Then Max. At the doorway my son turned around. For a moment neither of us spoke. Years of memories hung between us. Birthday parties. School plays. Family vacations. Christmas mornings. Everything. Then he said quietly. You're going to end up alone. The words were meant to hurt. Maybe once they would have. Not anymore. I looked him directly in the eye. Max. My voice softened. Not because I was weak. 'Cause I was finally honest. I've been alone for years. His expression changed. Just slightly. And for the first time, he didn't have a response. I slowly closed the door. The lock clicked. And suddenly, the house became silent. No manipulation. No pressure. No demands. No guilt. Just silence. Beautiful silence. I stood there in the middle of my living room, taking it all in. And for the first time in a very long time, felt free. That night I barely slept. Not because I was scared. Not because I regretted what I'd done. I couldn't sleep because my mind wouldn't stop replaying everything. The wedding. The rent calls. The lawyer. The power of attorney. And worst of all, Lena's words. Everything you have is going to belong to us someday anyway. Every time I heard that sentence in my head, my stomach twisted. Not because it hurt. Because it revealed the truth. The ugly truth I'd spent years refusing to see. To them I wasn't family. I was future money. Around 6 a.m. I finally gave up on sleep. I got dressed, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table. Instead of crying I started planning. Because if Max and Lena wanted a fight, I wasn't going to fight emotionally. I was going to fight smart. By 8:30 I was sitting in the office of Attorney Weber. A man I'd known years earlier when I handled my husband's estate. Unlike Mr. Fisher, Weber had a reputation that people actually respected. He specialized in protecting seniors. And after hearing my story, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Mrs. Richter. His expression grew serious. What your son and daughter-in-law attempted yesterday is more common than most people realize. I frowned. What do you mean? It's called elder financial abuse. The words hit me hard. I'd heard the term before. Usually on the news. Usually happening to other people. Never me. Mr. Weber continued. When family members become financially dependent on an older relative and then attempt to manipulate, pressure, or control that person's finances, it crosses a legal line. I sat silently. 'Cause suddenly everything made sense. The guilt trips. The emergencies. The pressure. The manipulation. The constant demands. This wasn't generosity anymore. This was exploitation. And bringing a lawyer into your house to pressure you into signing a power of attorney? He shook his head. That's a major red flag. I stared at him. So I'm not crazy. He laughed. Not politely. Not professionally. Actually laughed. No, Mrs. Richter. Then he added. Honestly, you may be the sanest person in this entire situation. For the first time in weeks I smiled. A real smile. We spent the next 3 hours reviewing every financial record I had. Every transfer. Every payment. Every gift. Every expense. The pile of paperwork kept growing. And so did Mr. Weber's expression. By noon we'd reached the final number. $33,400. He whistled. Wow. He nodded. Yeah. Mrs. Richter. He looked genuinely stunned. Most people would call that a down payment on a house. I laughed bitterly. Apparently, I called it parenting. He shook his head. No. Then he pointed at the documents. That isn't parenting. He paused. That's financial support for 2 fully capable adults. That sentence hit harder than I expected. 'Cause he was right. Max wasn't 20. He wasn't struggling through college. He wasn't a kid trying to get started. He was 35 years old. Married. Healthy. Perfectly capable of working. And yet somehow, his retirement-aged mother had been carrying him financially. Mr. Weber opened a legal folder. Here's what we're going to do. I sat up straighter. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like someone was actually on my side. First, he raised one finger. We're changing every lock on your house. I nodded immediately. No argument there. Second, another finger. We install a full security system. Again I nodded. Third finger. We move your finances to a new institution where your son has no connections. Smart. Very smart. And fourth, he leaned forward. We update your will. That one surprised me. My will. He nodded. After what happened, absolutely. I stared at the desk. The reality was painful. I had spent years assuming Max would naturally inherit everything. 'Cause that's what parents do. No. I wasn't so sure. Not because I wanted revenge. Because trust had been shattered. Mr. Weber seemed to read my thoughts. This isn't about punishment. He said it gently. It's about protection. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he added something that changed everything. You have every legal right to spend every penny you've earned on yourself. I blinked. The statement sounded simple. Obvious even. Somehow, I'd never thought about it that way. For years, every dollar felt like it already belonged to someone else. But, Lena. Their future. Their needs. Their emergencies. But what about my future? My needs. My life. What about me? The realization was almost overwhelming. Mr. Weber slid a document across the desk. Sign this. I glanced at it. Retainer agreement. Official legal representation. For the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't standing alone. Sign. When I handed the paper back, Mr. Weber smiled. Good. Then his expression turned serious. Because based on everything you've told me, he tapped the folder. I don't think they're done yet. A chill ran down my spine. You think they'll keep pushing? I know they will. His answer came instantly. No hesitation. No doubt. People don't walk away from a financial dependency quietly. The truth of that settled heavily in the room. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Max and Lena weren't panicking because they loved me. They were panicking because the money had stopped. And desperate people do desperate things. As I left his office, I realized something important. This wasn't just about ending financial support anymore. This was about defending my freedom. And for the first time, I was ready to do exactly that. The very next morning I started taking my life back. Not symbolically. Literally. My first stop was a local hardware store. The owner, Mr. Summer, had known me for years. Mostly because I was always buying things for Max and Lena's apartment. Faucet, ceiling fan, an air conditioner part, door lock, light fixture. Always for them. Never for me. When I walked in, he smiled. Mrs. Richter. Let me guess. Another emergency at your son's place. For a second I almost laughed. That had basically become my identity. Max's mother. Fixer. The wallet. The emergency contact. Not anymore. No, Mr. Summer. Smiled back. This time it's for my house. His eyebrows lifted. My house. I repeated it deliberately. I need every lock replaced. Now he looked surprised. Everything okay? For a moment I considered giving the short version. Instead I told him the truth. My son and daughter-in-law have keys. Mr. Summer didn't ask questions. The older you get, the more you learn when not to ask. Instead he nodded. I've got just the thing. An hour later, I had ordered the highest quality lock system he carried. Then his son Ethan walked into the store. Perfect timing. Ethan specialized in security systems, cameras, motion detectors, alarm systems, everything. And suddenly I had another idea. Ethan. He looked over. How quickly can you install cameras? He blinked. Depends. How many? All of them. He laughed. I didn't. The laugh faded immediately. You're serious? Very. By noon, we'd scheduled installation for the following morning. As I left the store, I felt oddly empowered. Every step I took was another brick in the wall protecting my peace. And I was done apologizing for that. Halfway home, my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it. But something told me who it was. Answered. Silence. Renata. Lena. Course. Blocked on one number. Calling from another. Classic. I leaned back in my seat. What do you want? A dramatic sigh. Then the sweet voice appeared. Fake sweet voice. The one she always used when she wanted something. Please don't hang up. Interesting. Not hello. Not how are you. Straight to damage control. I said nothing. She continued. Max and I have been talking. Translation. We're broke. We feel terrible about what happened. Translation. Rent is due. We want to make things right. Translation. Please start paying again. I could practically hear the desperation through the phone. Then she delivered the pitch. How about a family dinner? I almost laughed. Family dinner. Amazing. 3 weeks ago I wasn't important enough for the wedding. Now suddenly they wanted family time. We could celebrate properly. Silence. We could do it at your house. Course. My house. My food. Probably my money too. The manipulation wasn't even creative anymore. Lena. My voice stayed calm. How much do you owe? Silence. Gotcha. Excuse me. How much rent do you owe? Another pause. Longer this time. Finally. 2 months. There it was. $1,000. Smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. Everything suddenly made sense. The apology. The family dinner. The concern. The love. The reconciliation. All of it cost exactly $1,000. Renata, please. I interrupted her. No. He sounded shocked. As if she genuinely thought this conversation had a chance. We miss you. No, you don't. Yes, we do. No, Lena. I stared through my windshield. You miss my money. The silence on the other end was immediate. Heavy. Awkward. Because she knew I was right. Then something unexpected happened. For once, she told the truth. We miss both. Blinked. What? We miss both. Her voice cracked. You and the help. At least it was honest. Probably the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. But honesty doesn't erase damage. Just reveals it. If I'm so important, I said quietly, why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Silence. If I'm family, nothing. Why is every conversation about money? Still nothing. The answer was obvious. Because there wasn't a good one. Finally she whispered. We made a mistake. Maybe she believed that. Maybe she didn't. Either way, it was too late. Some mistakes break trust. Others destroy it. This one had destroyed it. I took a slow breath. Then spoke carefully. Lena. Yes. For 3 years I thought you loved me. Silence. I thought we were family. More silence. I thought helping you made me part of your life. Still nothing. Then I said the thing I'd been carrying inside for weeks. The truth is, you treated me like an ATM that happened to have feelings. Her breathing became shaky. Whether from guilt or fear I couldn't tell. Honestly, I didn't care. The difference between those two emotions wasn't my problem anymore. I deserved better. My voice remained steady. I deserved respect. Pause. I deserved honesty. Another pause. And I deserved an invitation. This time Lena started crying. Real tears. Or maybe not. At that point I genuinely couldn't tell. The problem with crying wolf for years is that eventually nobody knows when you're serious. Renata. No. Cut her off. There isn't anything left to discuss. Then I hung up. No dramatic speech. No argument. No yelling. Just a click. And silence. Beautiful silence. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in a very long time. I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman taking her life back. And honestly, she looked pretty good. The next afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in over a year. Something ridiculously simple. Something most people wouldn't think twice about. I booked a salon appointment. Sounds small, right? It wasn't. 4 years, every time I planned something for myself, an emergency would magically appear. Max needed help with rent. Lena needed money for groceries. The car needed repairs. The electric bill was due. There was always something. And somehow, my needs were always the first thing sacrificed. Not anymore. This time I kept the appointment. When I walked into the salon, Cynthia looked up from her station. Her eyes immediately widened. Well, look who finally decided to show up. I laughed. Hi, Cynthia. She wrapped me in a hug. Girl, I thought you forgot about us. Smiled. No. Then I said something that surprised even me. I just forgot about myself. For a moment, her expression softened. Because she understood exactly what I meant. Women always do. Especially women who've spent years taking care of everyone except themselves. A few minutes later I was sitting in the chair. Cape around my shoulders. Coffee in my hand. And for once, nobody was calling. Nobody was asking for money. Nobody was creating a crisis. The peace felt strange. Almost luxurious. So, Cynthia said while examining my hair. What are we doing today? I grinned. Everything. She laughed. I like the sound of that. And honestly, so did I. Haircut, color, manicure, pedicure, the full package. For years I would have felt guilty spending money on myself. Not today. Today every dollar felt like a declaration of independence. While she worked we talked. Not about Max. Not about Lena. Not about problems. Just life. Her kids. Her dreams. The vacation she'd been saving for. The books she was reading. Normal conversation. Healthy conversation. Conversation that didn't revolve around financial emergencies. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that. 3 hours later, Cynthia spun my chair toward the mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back. The haircut was beautiful. The color looked amazing. But that wasn't what caught my attention. It was my eyes. They looked different. Brighter. Lighter. Alive. Cynthia smiled. You look fantastic. I stared at my reflection. Then laughed. You know what? What? I actually feel fantastic. She nodded knowingly. Then she said something I'll never forget. That's because freedom looks good on people. As I walked out of the salon, I felt 10 years younger. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. For the first time in years, I was investing in myself. And the return was incredible. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed someone sitting on my front steps. For a split second, my heart jumped. After everything with Max and Lena, I immediately assumed trouble. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't them. It was an older woman, probably around my age, maybe a little younger. She stood up as I approached. A warm smile appeared on her face. Mrs. Richter. Yes. She extended her hand. My name is Eleanor Brooks. I shook it. The name sounded familiar. Then it clicked. The neighbor. She lived next door. We'd waved at each other for years but never really talked. Life had always been too busy. Or more accurately, I'd always been too busy solving Max and Lena's problems. Eleanor smiled nervously. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. Not at all. She hesitated, then spoke carefully. I heard some shouting from your house yesterday. I was worried. 3 simple words. I was worried. And suddenly I felt something unexpected. Emotion. Because here was a woman who barely knew me, showing more genuine concern than my own son. I smiled softly. That's very kind of you. I shrugged. Neighbors look out for each other. Imagine that. Looking out for someone without expecting money in return. What a concept. Would you like some coffee? Yes. Her face brightened. I'd love that. A few minutes later, we were sitting at my kitchen table. Coffee cups between us. And for some reason, I found myself telling her everything. The wedding. The humiliation. The rent money. The lawyer. The power of attorney. The threats. All of it. I expected judgment. Or awkward sympathy. Instead, Eleanor simply listened. Really listened. The way people do when they actually care. When I finished, she sat quietly for a moment. Then she sighed. Oh, honey. The sadness in her voice was genuine. Not performative. Not manipulative. Genuine. Something similar happened to me. I blinked. What? She nodded slowly. My daughter. I stared at her. For the next hour she told me her story. And it sounded terrifyingly familiar. Financial dependence. Emotional manipulation. Constant emergencies. Guilt. Pressure. Entitlement. Different people. Same script. What happened? Asked. Eleanor smiled. I cut off the money. That got my attention. And the first few months were awful. She laughed. There were tears. Screaming. Guilt trips. Threats. That sounded familiar. But eventually, she took a sip of coffee. My daughter had to grow up. I leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean she got a second job. I blinked. Eleanor continued. Her husband started working overtime. Another sip. They stopped living beyond their means. Then she smiled. And eventually they realized I was a person, not a retirement plan. That sentence hit me like lightning. Person. Not a retirement plan. Exactly. Do you think Max will ever understand? The question escaped before I could stop it. Eleanor thought for a moment, then gave me the most honest answer possible. Maybe. He nodded. She continued. Maybe not. Another nod. Then she leaned forward. But here's the important part. Waited. That's not your responsibility anymore. The words landed deep. 'Cause she was right. For decades, I'd felt responsible for everything. Max's happiness. Max's success. Max's finances. Max's future. But maybe, just maybe, the only person I was responsible for now was myself. That evening, after Eleanor left, I sat alone in my living room. Not lonely, just alone. There was a difference. For the first time in years, I wasn't worrying about somebody else's problems. I wasn't calculating bills. I wasn't preparing a rescue mission. I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I was simply existing. And honestly, felt amazing. Outside, the sun slowly disappeared below the horizon. Inside, for the first time in a very long time, felt hopeful. Because maybe my life wasn't ending. Maybe it was finally beginning. The next morning, right at 8 a.m., Ethan showed up with a truck full of equipment. Cameras, motion sensors, monitors. Enough gear to make my house look like a small bank branch. A few months ago, I would have felt ridiculous doing this. No, not even a little. If my own son was willing to bring lawyers into my house and try to take control of my finances, a few cameras suddenly seemed very reasonable. Ethan spent most of the morning installing everything. As he worked, my phone kept lighting up. Unknown number. Unknown number. Unknown number. Over and over. I didn't answer a single one. At this point, I could practically recognize Lena's desperation pattern. Every blocked number simply led to another borrowed phone. But I'd learned a valuable new skill. Ignoring people. Honestly. Highly recommend it. By lunchtime, the system was fully operational. Ethan handed me a tablet. Take a look. The screen showed live feeds from every angle around my property. Front door. Backyard. Driveway. Side gate. Everything. I stared at the display. A strange feeling settled over me. Safety. For the first time in years, I wasn't depending on anyone else to protect me. Not Max. Not family. Not luck. My peace was now in my own hands. Pretty impressive, huh? Ethan said. Smiled. Very. Then I added. It's funny. What is? I never thought I'd need a security system to protect myself from my own family. His smile disappeared. For a moment he didn't know what to say. Then he simply nodded. Sometimes silence is the most respectful response. After Ethan left, the house felt unusually quiet. I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, and suddenly realized something. I hadn't spoken to my sister Diana in months, maybe even longer. Not because we didn't love each other. Because my entire life had become consumed by Max and Lena. Every conversation eventually turned into them. Every story, every update, every crisis. Picked up the phone and dialed. Diana. Brief pause. Renata. Her voice immediately brightened. Sis, are you okay? I laughed. I'm actually better than okay. Really? Really? Then I told her everything. The wedding. The humiliation. The rent calls. The lawyer. The power of attorney. Everything. She listened quietly. Not interrupting. Not judging. Just listening. When I finally finished, there was a long pause. Then she sighed. Deep, tired sigh. Honestly. I frowned. What? It's about time. I blinked. What do you mean? Another pause. Then Diana said something that hit me harder than I expected. Every time we talked, it broke my heart. My stomach tightened. What are you talking about? Renata. Her voice softened. You always talked about how much money you were giving them. I stayed quiet. You talked about rent. Another pause. Groceries. Another. Car payments. Another. Medical bills. Then she asked. Do you know how rarely you talked about them actually loving you? The silence hit hard. 'Cause she was right. I couldn't remember the last time I'd told a story about Max doing something kind for me. Or thoughtful. Or loving. Most of my stories were financial reports disguised as family updates. Diana continued. And there was something else. A knot formed in my stomach. What? When I saw Max at family gatherings. Waited. He never talked about you the way sons normally talk about their mothers. I frowned. What does that mean? She hesitated. Then answered carefully. He'd say things like. A pause. Mom helped us with the car. Another pause. Mom covered our rent again. Another. Mom paid for this. I already knew where this was going. But hearing it still hurt. He never said. Diana's voice softened. I miss my mom. The knot tightened. I love my mom. Hater. I can't wait to see my mom. Closed my eyes. Because deep down, I'd already known. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. Then Diana dropped the real bombshell. There's something I never told you. My eyes opened immediately. What? Long pause. Long enough to make my pulse quicken. When Lena was talking with relatives at a family barbecue last year, I sat up straighter. She kept talking about your house. My stomach sank. What about it? Another pause. Then Diana repeated the words. Almost exactly. Once Renata is gone, we'll remodel the place. Froze. Diana continued. When we inherit, we'll finally have room for the business. Every word felt like a punch. The property alone is worth a fortune. Silence. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Or maybe I could. That's what hurt most. 'Cause suddenly, everything made sense. The entitlement, the confidence, the expectation. They weren't planning their future with me. They were planning it after me. Why didn't you tell me? My voice barely came out. Diana sighed. Because I didn't want to hurt you. I looked out the kitchen window. The backyard blurred slightly. Not because I was crying. Because reality was finally coming into focus. For years, I'd believed I was helping family. But in their minds, I wasn't family. I was a future asset. House. Bank account. An inheritance. A waiting game. You still there? Diana asked softly. Yeah. I swallowed hard. I'm here. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. Renata. What? You spent years taking care of everyone else. Listen. Maybe it's time somebody took care of you. For some reason. That was the sentence that almost made me cry. Not because it was dramatic. Because nobody had said it to me in years. After we hung up, I sat alone in my kitchen for a long time. Thinking. Processing. Remembering. The wedding. The money. The lawyer. The manipulation. The inheritance comments. All of it. One painful realization after another. But mixed into the pain was something unexpected. Clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when denial finally dies. And for the first time, I stopped asking myself if I was being too harsh. Because I wasn't. I was finally protecting myself. And there was nothing wrong with that. That evening, my new security cameras sent an alert. Movement detected at the front door. Opened the app. And immediately saw two familiar faces. Vic and Lena. Standing on my porch. Again. But this time, they weren't alone. And the sight of the two strangers standing beside them made my stomach drop. Because I had a feeling the next move in their game was about to be much bigger. The security alert hit my phone at 7:14 p.m. I was halfway through dinner when it buzzed. Normally, I would have ignored it. But after everything that had happened, I checked every notification. The moment I opened the camera feed, my stomach tightened. Max and Lena were standing on my front porch. Again. But this time they weren't alone. Two strangers stood beside them. A man and a woman. Both carrying clipboards. Both dressed professionally. Neither looked happy to be there. I immediately called Attorney Weber. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Richter. I think they're here. Was. Who? Max, Lena. And two people I don't recognize. His voice changed instantly. What do they look like? I described them. There was a brief silence. Do not open the door. My pulse jumped. What? Stay inside. His tone was firm. Professional. Urgent. Let me make a few calls. The line went dead. Outside Max knocked. Then knocked again. Then again. Nobody answered. A minute later, Lena stepped forward and pressed the doorbell repeatedly. The camera microphone picked up her voice. Renata. We know you're home. I remained exactly where I was. Sitting in my living room. Watching. Waiting. Learning. For years, I would have opened the door immediately. Not anymore. Then something strange happened. One of the strangers pulled out paperwork. Lots of paperwork. The woman pointed toward my house. The man nodded. Then both started taking notes. My heart started pounding. What exactly were they doing? 5 minutes later my phone rang again. Attorney Weber answered instantly. What's happening? His voice was calm, which somehow made me even more nervous. I believe those people are from Adult Protective Services. Blinked. What? They may have received a complaint. Complaint? Against me. Suddenly everything clicked. The lawyer. The power of attorney. The claims about my judgment. The accusations about my mental state. This wasn't random. It was escalation. They reported me. My voice sounded distant. Weber sighed. I can't prove it yet. Then he added. But I'd be very surprised if they didn't. I felt anger rising. Not explosive anger. The cold kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that comes when someone tries to steal your reality. They're trying to make me look incompetent. Yes. The answer came immediately. No hesitation. No sugarcoating. Just the truth. Outside, the visitors continued talking among themselves. Then the woman approached the door. She knocked politely. Much more politely than Max had. When I still didn't answer, she left a card in the mailbox. Then stepped back. No threats. No drama. No pressure. Just procedure. Which immediately told me something important. Unlike Max and Lena, these people were professionals. Should I talk to them? Yes. Not tonight. Weber replied. Tomorrow morning, call the number on the card. Okay. And Mrs. Richter? Yes. If they truly filed a report, don't panic. Easier said than done. But I listened. People file false reports all the time. He paused. The difference is that you have evidence. I looked around my living room. The cameras. The financial records. The legal documents. The bank statements. Paper trail. For the first time I realized he was right. Facts were on my side. Outside, the meeting finally ended. The strangers walked toward their car. Then something happened that changed everything. Lena thought they were out of camera range. She was wrong. Very wrong. The new security system had excellent audio. And I heard every word. Every single word. The woman shook Lena's hand politely. Then headed toward her vehicle. As soon as she was gone, Lena's entire expression changed. The smile disappeared. The friendliness vanished. And she snapped. What do you mean they need evidence? The microphone caught every syllable. My heart started racing. The man beside her shrugged. We told you this wasn't enough. Enough for what? Then Max spoke. And what came out of his mouth made my blood run cold. She cut us off. Silence. That proves something's wrong. The stranger immediately shook his head. No, it doesn't. I stared at the screen, unable to look away. Then came the bombshell. The stranger lowered his voice. But the microphone still picked it up. If your goal is legal guardianship, my breath caught. You're going to need actual evidence of incapacity. Legal guardianship. Not concern. Not family support. Not help. Guardianship. Control. Authority. Power. Everything Weber had warned me about. Everything. The stranger continued. You can't just claim someone is incompetent because they stopped giving you money. Silence. Then Lena exploded. That's not what happened. The man didn't look convinced. Neither did the woman. In fact, both looked uncomfortable. Like they were beginning to understand exactly what this situation was. Then Max said something that broke whatever remained of my heart. Not because it surprised me. Because it confirmed everything. We built our whole future around her support. The stranger stared at him. Clearly shocked he'd admitted that. And honestly, so was I. Not because I didn't know. Because I'd never heard him say it out loud. The woman crossed her arms. That's not her responsibility. Silence. Beautiful silence. Then she added. Your mother is allowed to spend her money however she wants. I almost smiled. Because those were nearly the exact same words Weber had used. Apparently reality sounds the same no matter who says it. For several long seconds nobody spoke. Then the visitors left. Just like that. Cars pulled away. One after another. Leaving only Max and Lena standing in the driveway. Alone. Frustrated. Cornered. For a moment they simply stood there. Then Lena kicked the bottom step of my porch. Hard. I heard her curse. Then she turned toward Max. And the microphone captured one final sentence. One sentence that changed everything. We need another plan. Another plan. Not an apology. Not reconciliation. Not healing. Plan. I immediately picked up my phone. And called Weber. Again. He answered instantly. What happened? I took a slow breath. Then said. I think we just got proof. Silence. Proof of what? I looked at the frozen camera image showing my son and daughter-in-law standing on my porch. And answered quietly. That this was never about family. The next morning I was sitting in Attorney Weber's office again. This time I wasn't scared. I was prepared. The security footage had already been copied to multiple drives. Every conversation. Every threat. Every admission. Every mistake Max and Lena had made while standing on my porch. All preserved. All timestamped. All documented. And according to Weber, that changed everything. He sat across from me reviewing the recordings. Occasionally stopping. Rewinding. Listening again. Making notes. Finally he removed his glasses. And smiled. Not a polite smile. A satisfied smile. The kind lawyers get when facts are stronger than emotions. This is excellent evidence. Blinked. Really? Absolutely. He tapped the table. Especially this part. He replayed the recording. Max's voice filled the room. We built our whole future around her support. The audio stopped. Weber leaned back. That's devastating. I frowned. It is. He nodded. Because he admitted financial dependence. Then he pointed at another section. Lena's voice. We need another plan. Silence. Weber smiled again. And that suggests intent. The knot in my stomach finally started loosening. For the first time since the wedding. Someone wasn't just telling me I was right. They could prove I was right. A few hours later I received a phone call. The woman from Adult Protective Services. Her name was Karen Mitchell. She sounded professional. Respectful. Nothing like the picture Lena had probably painted of me. Mrs. Richter, I'd like to schedule a visit. Of course. A pause. Just to be clear. Her voice softened. You're not in trouble. I almost laughed. After the past few weeks, those words felt strangely comforting. Karen arrived the following afternoon. Unlike Max and Lena, she asked permission before entering. A surprisingly refreshing concept. She spent nearly 2 hours with me. We talked about everything. My finances, my health, my daily routine, my investments, my legal documents, my retirement plans. At one point she even asked me to explain how I managed my accounts. I pulled out spreadsheets, budgets, statements, records, years of records. By the end she looked impressed. Very impressed. Finally she closed her folder. And smiled. Mrs. Richter. Yes. I have to say. She laughed softly. You're probably one of the most organized people I've ever met. I couldn't help smiling. Thank you. She shook her head. No. Then she added. Seriously. You clearly understand your finances better than most people half your age. That felt good to hear. Not because I needed validation. Because it completely destroyed the narrative Max and Lena were trying to create. Then Karen said something interesting. Something that made my pulse quicken. We've actually seen situations like this before. I leaned forward. What kind of situations? Her expression became careful. Professional. When family members become financially dependent on an older relative. He nodded. Sometimes they mistake financial access for entitlement. Entitlement. Exactly. That was the word. Not need. not hardship. Entitlement. Then Karen opened another file. A different file. One she hadn't brought with her earlier. There's something you should know. My stomach tightened. What? She hesitated. Then continued. During our interviews, your son and daughter-in-law made several contradictory statements. I stared at her. Contradictory how? Karen glanced at her notes. Initially they claimed they were worried about your mental health. He nodded. That part one already knew. But later. He paused. They spent most of the interview discussing money. Course they did. Karen continued reading. Rent assistance. Flip. Utility payments. Flip. Vehicle expenses. Flip. Future inheritance. That one caught my attention immediately. Future inheritance. Karen nodded. They mentioned it several times. Several times. Not once. Not accidentally. Several times. I closed my eyes for a moment. Because hearing it from a government investigator somehow made it more real. Then came the moment that truly changed everything. Karen slid a document across the table. I looked down. My eyes widened. What is this? It's a transcript. I started reading. And immediately recognized Lena's words. A statement she'd given during her interview. One sentence had been highlighted. The highlighted sentence read, "She always helped us before, so we assumed she would continue." I stared at it. Again. And again. And again. Nut. We loved her. Nut. We cared about her. Nut. We were worried about her. Mo. The foundation of their argument was expectation. They expected access. Expected support. Expected money. Karen folded her hands. Mrs. Richter. Yes. In my professional opinion. She chose her words carefully. This doesn't appear to be a case of an elderly person needing protection. It appears to be a case of an elderly person protecting herself. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Because nobody had framed it that way before. Everyone kept talking about conflict, family drama, arguments, money. But Karen saw the real issue. I wasn't attacking anyone. I was defending myself. After she left, I sat quietly in my living room, thinking, reflecting, breathing. For weeks I'd questioned myself. Wondered if I was overreacting. Wondered if I was being cruel. Wondered if I was somehow the villain in this story. Not anymore. The facts were clear. The evidence was clear. The truth was clear. That evening Attorney Weber called. And this time, he sounded excited. Mrs. Richter. What happened? We found something. Immediately my heart started racing. What? Brief pause. We pulled public financial records. I frowned. Okay. Another pause. Then Weber dropped the bombshell. The rent isn't their biggest problem. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Silence. They're drowning in debt. And according to Weber, what he discovered next would explain exactly why Max and Lena had become so desperate. The next morning, Attorney Weber called before I had even finished my first cup of coffee. That alone was unusual. Weber wasn't the kind of man who rushed into dramatic phone calls. He dealt in facts, evidence, documentation. So when he said, "Mrs. Richter, we need to talk," I immediately knew something serious had happened. An hour later, I was sitting across from him in his office. A thick folder rested on his desk. Much thicker than the last one. My stomach tightened. What's in there? Weber looked at me for a moment. Then slowly opened the file. Debt. One word. That was all he said. He slid several documents across the desk. Credit reports, public filings, business registrations, loan records. I stared at the stack. What am I looking at? Weber adjusted his glasses. Your son and daughter-in-law are in far worse financial shape than they admitted. A cold feeling settled in my chest. How bad? He looked down at the papers, then answered. Very bad. The first document was a credit card summary. Multiple cards. Multiple lenders. multiple overdue balances. I blinked once, trying to make sure I was reading it correctly. The total balance exceeded $40,000. $40,000. On credit cards alone. My jaw tightened, because suddenly I remembered all those conversations. The expensive dinners Lena posted online. The weekend trips. The designer handbags. The newest phones. The luxury purchases. The lifestyle. Now I knew how they had been funding it. Lots of debt. Weber turned another page. This gets worse. Of course it did. It always did. The next file involved a business. Or at least, an attempted business. Apparently, 6 months earlier Max and Lena had invested heavily in an online startup. A venture that promised quick profits, big growth, financial freedom. All the usual fantasy language. The business failed. Spectacularly. And they lost almost everything they'd put into it. How much? My voice barely came out. Weber checked the documents. Approximately $35,000. I stared at him. $40,000 in credit card debt. $35,000 lost in business investments. The numbers kept growing. And growing. And growing. Then Weber delivered the part that made everything click. The timing is important. I looked up. What do you mean? He pointed to the dates. The business collapsed roughly 3 months before the wedding. 3 months. My heart sank. Because suddenly the timeline made perfect sense. The desperation. The pressure. The rent calls. The attempts to secure control over my finances. The guardianship discussions. The inheritance comments. The power of attorney. Everything. They were already drowning. I said quietly. Weber nodded. Yes. And they saw me as the solution. Another nod. Yes. The word landed heavily. Not because it shocked me. Because it confirmed what I'd already begun to suspect. For years, I'd believed the money requests were temporary. Rough patch. Little support. Helping hand. But this was different. This wasn't assistance. This was dependence. A permanent financial strategy built around me. Then Weber opened another section of the file. And suddenly things became even uglier. There are messages. My stomach tightened. What kind of messages? Messages related to future financial planning. The phrase sounded harmless. It wasn't. He slid a printed page toward me. The messages had been obtained legally during related inquiries. At first, I didn't want to read them. Then curiosity won. The first one was from Lena. Once we get through the next few years, things will be easier. The response came from Max. Especially after Mom's house eventually becomes ours. My breath stopped. For a second I couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't speak. Weber stayed silent. Giving me space. Giving me time. Giving me dignity. Something my own family hadn't done in years. I continued reading. Another message. Another conversation. Another glimpse into how they actually viewed me. We don't need to panic. The property alone solves most of our problems. Property. Not mom. Not family. Property. Closed my eyes. Because suddenly I understood something painful. They hadn't been planning for success. They'd been planning for inheritance. Their future calculations included my assets. My home. My savings. My retirement. Everything. The realization hurt. Not because of the money. Because of the mindset. A loving son hopes his mother lives a long, happy life. A loving son doesn't build financial projections around her eventual death. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Weber broke the silence. Mrs. Richter. I looked up. Yes. What are you feeling right now? The question surprised me. Thought about it. Really thought about it. Anger. Not exactly. Sadness. Partly. Betrayal. Definitely. But there was something else. Something stronger. Acceptance. I think. I took a deep breath. I think I'm finally seeing reality. Weber nodded slowly. As if that was exactly the answer he expected. Then he opened the final section of the file. And what he said next changed everything. "There's one more thing." I frowned. "What?" He folded his hands and spoke carefully. "Based on everything we've uncovered, I strongly recommend changing your estate plan immediately." The room suddenly felt very quiet, very serious, very final. 'Cause for the first time, the conversation wasn't about stopping Max and Lena. It was about protecting my future and deciding who deserved to be part of it. That night I sat alone on my back porch, watching the sunset, thinking about everything I'd learned. The debt, the business failure, the inheritance plans, the manipulation, the lies. For years I had been financing a fantasy where love and financial support were the same thing. They weren't. Never had been. My phone buzzed. Text message. From Max. The first direct message in days. I stared at the screen, then opened it. The message contained only one sentence. "Mom, we really need to talk." No apology. No accountability. No explanation. Just urgency. Just need. Just another problem. And for the first time, I wasn't in a hurry to solve it. The text sat on my screen for almost 10 minutes. "Mom, we really need to talk." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement. "Well, I'm sorry." "Well, I was wrong." Just another request. Another demand disguised as urgency. I stared at it for a moment, then locked my phone. If Max wanted a conversation, he was going to have to do something he'd avoided for years. Take responsibility. The next day, I met Attorney Weber again. This time the topic wasn't debt. It wasn't guardianship. It wasn't Lena. It wasn't even Max. It was my future. Specifically, my will. The conversation felt surreal. For decades, my estate plan had been simple. Everything went to Max. The house, the savings, the investments, everything. Not because he'd earned it. 'Cause he was my son. That was simply how I had always imagined things would work. Now, nothing felt simple anymore. Weber placed the documents on the desk. "You don't have to make any decisions today." He nodded. But deep down, I knew a decision had already been forming for weeks. Maybe years. I just hadn't admitted it yet. What happens if I leave things exactly as they are? Yes. Weber answered honestly. Then eventually everything transfers to your son. I sat quietly, looking out the window, thinking, reflecting, remembering. Then I asked another question. What happens if I change it? Weber smiled slightly. Then your assets go wherever you choose. Simple, direct, true. For years I'd treated my estate as something that already belonged to Max, as though I were merely holding it for him. But Weber's words reminded me of something important. It was still mine. All of it. The house, the money, the investments, the life I'd spent decades building. That realization felt strangely powerful, because somewhere along the way I'd forgotten. A few days later, another message arrived from Max. Longer this time. Much longer. I opened it cautiously. I know things have been difficult. I know you're upset. But we're still family. Life is too short for this kind of conflict. You only get one son. Please don't let outsiders come between us. Let's meet and talk. I read it twice. Then a third time. Something bothered me. Not what was there. What wasn't. No accountability. No apology. No ownership. The entire message revolved around my reaction. Not his actions. A subtle but important difference. Then I noticed another sentence. One I'd almost missed. Don't let outsiders come between us. Outsiders. Interesting. Apparently, Attorney Weber was an outsider. Karen from Adult Protective Services was an outsider. Eleanor was probably an outsider too. Anyone who challenged their access to my money became an outsider. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because the manipulation was becoming easier and easier to spot. Once you see the pattern, it's impossible to unsee it. That afternoon, Eleanor stopped by, as she'd been doing regularly lately. Not because she needed anything, just because she enjoyed the company. What a refreshing concept. We sat on the back porch drinking iced tea. The weather was perfect. Warm sunshine, gentle breeze, birds singing in the trees. Actual peace. I showed her Max's message. She read it slowly, then handed the phone back. Interesting. Smiled. That's one word for it. She laughed, then pointed at the screen. Notice something. What? No apology. Exactly. We sat quietly for a moment. Then Eleanor surprised me. Can I ask you something? Of course. She hesitated, then smiled. Have you ever thought about traveling? And blinked. What? Traveling? I laughed. Not in years. That wasn't entirely true. I thought about it constantly. I just never did it. Because there was never enough money. Or so I told myself. In reality, there was always enough money. I was simply spending it on other people. Eleanor leaned back. My sister and I took a river cruise through Europe last year. I listened. It was incredible. Her eyes lit up as she talked. The food, the cities, people, the memories, joy. And suddenly something hit me. Hard. I couldn't remember the last time someone talked to me about possibilities instead of problems. For years, every conversation had been about emergencies, bills, repairs, money, stress, crisis. This was different. This was about living. Then Eleanor smiled. What if you stopped planning around everyone else's future? I looked at her. What do you mean? What if you started planning around yours? The words settled over me. Slowly, powerfully. What exactly are you suggesting? Her smile widened. I'm suggesting you make a list. A list. A bucket list. I laughed. Real laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere deep. I haven't had a bucket list since I was 20. Maybe it's time for a new one. That evening, after Eleanor left, I sat at my kitchen table. A blank notebook in front of me. For several minutes, I just stared at the page. Then I wrote. Things I still want to do. The first item appeared almost immediately. Visit Italy. Then another. Paris. Another. Take a train across the Canadian Rockies. Another. Learn watercolor painting. Another. Take dance lessons. The list kept growing. And with every new line, something incredible happened. Felt excited. Not worried. Not stressed. Excited. For the future. My future. Halfway through the list, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Max. I glanced at it. But this time, I didn't open it. Because for the first time in years, somebody else's emergency wasn't the most important thing in my life. Mine was. And as I sat there writing down dreams I'd postponed for decades, I realized something. The biggest thing Max and Lena had taken from me wasn't money. It wasn't time. It wasn't even trust. They had taken my attention away from my own life. And now, I was taking it back. The following Monday, I officially changed my will. No drama. No grand speech. No emotional breakdown. Just paperwork. Carefully reviewed. Carefully signed. Carefully filed. Attorney Weber sat across from me as I completed the final signatures. When I finished, he slid the documents into a folder and closed it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. How do you feel? Thought about it. Really thought about it. Relieved. And surprisingly, that was the truth. Not guilty. Not vindictive. Not angry. Relieved. Like I'd finally stopped carrying a weight I was never supposed to carry. As I left Weber's office, my phone vibrated. Again. Third time that day. Ignored. A minute later, another call. Ignored. Then a text. Mom, please. This is important. I rolled my eyes. Everything was always important when money was involved. 2 days later, I was watering flowers in my front yard when a car pulled into my driveway. I immediately recognized it. Of course, I sighed. Not because I was afraid. 'Cause I was tired. Tired of the games. Tired of the manipulation. Tired of being treated like a financial institution instead of a mother. The driver's door opened. Max stepped out. Alone. No Lena. That was new. Immediately I noticed something different. His clothes looked wrinkled. His eyes looked tired. His shoulders seemed heavier. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the lawyer. The guardianship attempt. The wedding. The inheritance plans. The sympathy faded. Mom. His voice sounded fragile. I didn't respond immediately. Instead I set down the watering can. What do you want, Max? The directness clearly surprised him. But I was done wasting time. For a second he simply stood there. Then something unexpected happened. His eyes filled with tears. Real tears. At least they looked real. Mom. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I stared at him. Silent. Waiting. Listening. I messed up. Another pause. I know I did. More tears. More emotion. More vulnerability. The performance was impressive. Maybe even genuine. I wasn't sure anymore. Then he stepped forward. I hate what's happened between us. Still silent. Still listening. Still waiting. For years this would have worked. One tear. One apology. One emotional conversation. And I'd have immediately forgiven everything. Not this time. Because this time I wasn't listening to his emotions. I was listening for accountability. And so far, I hadn't heard much. What exactly are you apologizing for? I asked calmly. His expression froze. Just for a second. But I saw it. The hesitation. The calculation. The uncertainty. What do you mean? Interesting answer. Nut. I excluded you from my wedding. Nut. I tried to take control of your finances. Nut. I treated you badly. Instead. What do you mean? I folded my arms. What specifically are you apologizing for? The silence stretched. Long. Awkward. Uncomfortable. Finally he answered. For everything. There it was. The universal non-answer. For everything. Meaning nothing. Meaning everything. Meaning whatever the listener wants it to mean. I nodded slowly. Then said. No. His eyebrows furrowed. No. No. I held his gaze. If you're apologizing, you should know what you're apologizing for. Silence. For the first time, Max looked genuinely uncomfortable. Not emotional. Not hurt. Cornered. Then he tried a different approach. Mom, people make mistakes. He nodded. That's true. And family forgives each other. Also true. But incomplete. I stepped closer. Family also respects each other. Silence. Family doesn't try to take control of each other's bank accounts. More silence. Family doesn't discuss inheritance while the person is still alive. His face paled. That one landed. Hard. 'Cause now he knew. He knew I knew. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then something strange happened. His entire demeanor shifted. Slowly, but noticeably. Like an actor changing roles mid-scene. And suddenly, Attorney Weber's warnings echoed in my head. People who are desperate become very persuasive. Before Max could continue, a voice called out from next door. Renata. Turned. Eleanor was standing at her mailbox. A wave. Then started walking toward us. The moment she appeared, I noticed something interesting. Max's expression changed again. This time not sadness. Annoyance. Actual annoyance. As if Eleanor's presence had interrupted something. That immediately caught my attention. Because if this conversation were truly about repairing our relationship, why would a witness be a problem? Eleanor reached us and smiled politely. Hope I'm not interrupting. You aren't, said. Max forced a smile. The kind people make when they're trying very hard not to show irritation. Then Eleanor looked at him. And said something completely unexpected. Something that made my stomach tighten instantly. Oh! She tilted her head. I've seen you before. Max blinked. What? Eleanor frowned thoughtfully. Last month. The color immediately drained from Max's face. Noticed. So did Eleanor. You were at the cafe downtown. Silence. Complete silence. Then she added, "With that financial advisor." My pulse jumped. "What financial advisor?" Max's jaw tightened. "You're mistaken." The answer came too quickly. Far too quickly. Eleanor shook her head. "No." Then she smiled politely. "I'm pretty sure I remember. You were discussing inheritance projections." The air seemed to leave the entire yard. I slowly turned toward my son. Very slowly. Very carefully. And suddenly, tears. The apology. The surprise visit. Everything felt different. Because if Eleanor was right, then Max had been planning around my estate long before our fight ever happened. And judging by the panic on his face, he knew exactly what she was talking about. For a few seconds nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The world seemed to shrink down to 3 people standing in a quiet front yard. Me, Eleanor, and Max. Max was the first to break the silence. "That's ridiculous." His voice came out sharper than intended. Too fast. Too defensive. The kind of response people give when they're caught off guard. Eleanor didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply shrugged. "I'm just saying what I remember." Then she looked at me. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop." He nodded. "I know." She continued. "The table was right beside mine." Max's jaw tightened. "I think you've misunderstood what you heard." Again. Too quick. Too rehearsed. Too desperate. Eleanor folded her arms. "I heard the phrase inheritance projection 3 times. Silence. I heard someone discussing property values. More silence. And I heard someone estimate future assets." The silence became unbearable. I slowly looked at my son. "Is she lying?" His eyes met mine. Then immediately looked away. That was answer enough. 4 years I'd known Max's tells. Parents always know. The little habits. Tiny shifts. The subtle signs. When he was 6 years old and broke a lamp, he couldn't look me in the eye. When he was 15 and dented the car, same thing. Now, 35 years old. Still doing it. "Mom." "No." My voice stopped him. Firm. Controlled. No more half-truths. He swallowed. Hard. Then finally spoke. "It wasn't what you think." The oldest line in human history. Right behind. "I can explain." Then explain. Silence. Eleanor quietly stepped back. Giving us space. Giving him a chance. A chance I wasn't sure he deserved. Max rubbed his face. Clearly searching for the right words. Finally he sighed. "We were trying to make financial plans." There it was. The beginning of honesty. Maybe. "What kind of plans?" My voice stayed calm. His didn't. "Long-term plans." "What kind?" Another pause. Then finally. "We were trying to understand what our future might look like." I stared at him. Waiting. And his shoulders dropped. Defeated. Cornered. "And your estate was part of those discussions." There it was. Loud. Finally. I expected anger. I expected heartbreak. I expected rage. It felt tired. Just tired. Because hearing it spoken aloud didn't reveal anything new. It simply confirmed what I'd already learned. "You were planning your future around my death." The sentence hung in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. Max flinched. "That's not fair." I almost laughed. Not fair. Interesting choice of words. "Really?" I looked directly at him. "You discussed my house." Silence. "My savings." Silence. "My assets." Silence. "My inheritance." Silence. Then I asked the question that mattered. "Did you ever once make a financial plan that didn't include me paying for something?" His face fell. Because he couldn't answer. Not honestly. The silence stretched. 1 second. 5 seconds. Then finally. "No." Barely above a whisper. But I heard it. So did Eleanor. For the first time since this entire nightmare started, I felt something unexpected. Not anger. Closure. Because the truth was finally standing in broad daylight. No excuses, no manipulation, no pretending, just truth. Max looked exhausted, broken even. But for the first time I realized something important. There was a difference between suffering consequences and being a victim. He wasn't a victim. He was facing reality. Maybe for the first time in his life. Mom! His voice cracked again. I don't know how things got this bad. I did. Years of dependency. Years of entitlement. Years of never hearing the word no. But I didn't say that. 'Cause honestly, I was done teaching lessons. Life was about to handle that part. Instead I said something simple. Something final. Something true. You built your future around the wrong person. He looked confused. What? Pointed at myself. You built it around me. Then I pointed at him. When you should have built it around yourself. The words hit harder than any argument ever could. Because deep down, he knew they were true. For a long moment nobody spoke. The afternoon breeze moved gently through the trees. Car passed somewhere down the street. Life continued. Finally Max asked, "So what happens now?" A few months ago that question would have terrified me. Now, the answer felt obvious. You figure it out. His eyes widened. That's it. He nodded. That's adulthood. Silence. Then I gave him the truth I'd spent years avoiding. I already raised my child. I looked him directly in the eye. Now it's time for the man to take over. For a second I thought he might argue. Might beg. Might try one last guilt trip. Is it? He looked down. And for the first time in years, he had no answer. A few moments later he walked back to his car. No yelling. No threats. No dramatic goodbye. Just quiet footsteps. I watched him drive away. Slowly disappearing down the street. And strangely enough, I wasn't sad. Not because I didn't love him. I always would. He was my son. Nothing could change that. But love and enabling are not the same thing. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood the difference. After the car disappeared, Eleanor stepped beside me. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she smiled. You okay? I looked up at the sky, took a deep breath, and smiled back. Yeah, was. Actually. I laughed softly. I think I finally am. 6 months later, life looked completely different. Not overnight. Not magically. Not perfectly. But different. And for the first time in years, different was exactly what I wanted. The first thing that changed was the silence. First it felt strange. No emergency phone calls. No last-minute requests. No mysterious financial disasters. No rent crises. No urgent transfers. No emotional hostage situations disguised as family conversations. Just peace. Real peace. The kind I had forgotten existed. I spent the first few months doing something I hadn't done in decades. Living for myself. Not selfishly. Simply honestly. I took Eleanor's advice. I started checking things off my list. One by one. I enrolled in a watercolor class. At first I was terrible. Absolutely terrible. My trees looked like broccoli. My mountains looked like potatoes. And my sunsets looked like kitchen accidents. But I loved every second of it. 'Cause nobody was grading me. Nobody needed anything from me. I was doing it simply because it made me happy. A few weeks later I booked a trip. Italy. The dream I'd postponed for almost 30 years. Every time I'd considered traveling, something always came up. Bill. Crisis. Request. A responsibility. Not this time. Standing in Venice with a cup of coffee in my hand, watching the sunrise over the canals, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not financial freedom. Not legal freedom. Personal freedom. The freedom to belong to myself again. Life wasn't standing still for Max and Lena either. According to mutual relatives, things got difficult. Very difficult. The debt didn't disappear. The bills didn't magically pay themselves. Reality finally arrived. And reality doesn't negotiate. Max took a second job. Then a third contract position on weekends. Lena started working full-time. Really working. Not planning. Not waiting. Working. First they struggled. Lot. There were arguments. Stress. Long nights. Tough decisions. The kind of decisions adults make every day. The kind I'd spent years shielding them from. Then something interesting happened. Slowly. They started solving their own problems. Not because someone rescued them. 'Cause nobody did. The rent got paid. The debt started shrinking. The luxury spending stopped. The fantasy lifestyle disappeared. And something healthier began replacing it. Responsibility. About 4 months after our confrontation, I received a letter from Max. An actual letter. Not a text. Not a demand. Not a request. Letter. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. Simple. Honest. Unexpected. I wanted to apologize properly. Not because I need something. Not because I'm in trouble. And not because someone told me to. Kept reading. For the first time in my life, I'm paying for my own mistakes. And honestly, I think I needed that. My eyes lingered on the sentence. 'Cause it sounded real. Different. Sure. The letter continued. I spent years treating your help like something I was entitled to. I never stopped to ask what it was costing you. That's on me. I closed my eyes briefly, taking it in. Then came the final paragraph. You deserved better than the way I treated you. I know I can't change the past. But I hope someday I can earn back a small part of your trust. Love. Back. That was it. No request. No hidden agenda. No account number. No emergency. Just accountability. For a long time I simply sat there, reading it again. Then one more time. And surprisingly, cried. Not because I was sad. Because I finally heard the thing I'd been waiting years to hear. Responsibility. Did it erase everything? Well, trust takes time. Sometimes years. But it was a beginning. A real beginning. Not manipulation. Not strategy. Not another plan. Beginning. A month later we met for coffee. Just the two of us. No lawyers. No Lena. No arguments. No money. For the first time in years we actually talked. Not about bills. Not about debt. Not about support. About life. The conversation wasn't perfect. Some moments were awkward. Some wounds were still healing. But it was honest. And honesty is where healing begins. As for Lena, that took longer. Much longer. But eventually she sent a letter too. Order. Less emotional. But sincere. She admitted she'd viewed me as a financial safety net. Admitted she'd crossed lines. Admitted she'd been wrong. And not a miracle. Not a complete transformation. Just accountability. And honestly, that was enough. One evening, nearly a year after the wedding disaster, Eleanor and I sat on my back porch watching the sunset. A tradition we'd developed. Coffee. Conversation. Sunset. Simple things. The best things. She smiled. You seem happy. I looked out across the yard. The flowers. Trees. The home I'd worked my entire life to build. Then I thought about Italy. The painting classes. The new friendships. Peace. The freedom. The future. And I smiled. Yeah. I really am. Eleanor laughed softly. I told you freedom looked good on you. Laughed too. 'Cause she had. Months ago. Back when I was still learning how to choose myself. The sun slowly disappeared below the horizon. The sky turned gold. Then orange. Then deep blue. And for the first time in many years, I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I wasn't worried about the next phone call. I wasn't carrying somebody else's life on my shoulders. I was simply living my own. And maybe that was the lesson in all of this. Love your family. Help when you can. Be generous. Be kind. But never confuse love with obligation. Never confuse support with sacrifice. And never give away so much of yourself that there's nothing left for you. Because sometimes, the most important person you'll ever learn to take care of is yourself.